They thought signing my termination papers would be the end of it. After 18 years of building their empire from nothing, they dismissed me with a corporate smile and a cardboard box. But they forgot one crucial detail. I held the key to their kingdom. Literally, when they demanded I return everything that belonged to the company, I complied to the letter. Within weeks, their bustling office became an empty shell, sealed with an eviction notice. This isn't just revenge. This is what happens when you forget who really holds the power. My name is Emily Ward, and on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, I walked into what would be my last meeting at Brightstone Solutions. The email had come through at 8:45 a.m. Just a quick note from HR asking me to stop by the conference room for a brief discussion. After 18 years, I knew corporate speak well enough to recognize when something was off. The mahogany table that had witnessed countless strategy sessions now held only 3 people. Marcus from HR, adjusting his glasses nervously, a woman in a severe black suit I'd never seen before, clearly legal counsel, and Travis Lane, our new CEO who'd been brought in 6 months ago to modernize operations, the kind of executive who used words like synergy and pivot while understanding nothing about the foundation he stood on. "Emily, please have a seat," Marcus began, his voice carrying that rehearsed quality of someone about to deliver bad news. The lawyer slid a folder across the table before I'd even settled into the chair. "We're restructuring," Travis announced, as if he were discussing the weather. "Your position has been identified as redundant, effective immediately." Redundant. The word hung in the air like a bad joke. I'd been here since the company had 4 employees and a printer that only worked if you kicked it twice. I'd negotiated our first real contracts, set up our entire operational infrastructure, managed everything from payroll to facilities, but sure, redundant. "We appreciate your years of service," the lawyer interjected with practiced precision. "Your severance package is outlined in the documents. We'll need you to return all company property, laptop, access cards, keys, any files or documents in your possession." I nodded, maintaining the composure that had served me through 2 decades of corporate battles. Slowly, deliberately, I removed the company laptop from my bag and placed it on the table. Then came the access card, the parking pass, the corporate credit card. My fingers found the keyring in my pocket. 3 keys total. 2 went on the table, 1 for the supply closet, 1 for the executive bathroom that I'd earned access to 5 years ago. The 3rd key, a simple brass key that looked identical to hundreds of others, remained in my closed palm. It was the master key to the building. Yes, but more importantly, it was the key to the office space that Brightstone Solutions had called home for 15 years. The space that, due to a temporary arrangement from our startup days, was still leased under my name, Emily Ward, sole lessee, as the contract stated in black and white. "Is that everything?" Marcus asked, eager to wrap up this unpleasant business. "You asked for everything that belongs to the company," I replied, placing the 2 keys on the table with a soft click. "This is everything that belongs to the company." Travis was already checking his phone, mentally moving on to his next meeting. The lawyer was closing her folder with the efficiency of someone who'd done this dozens of times. Marcus looked relieved it was almost over. "We'll need you to clean out your desk immediately," he said. "Security will escort you." Security? After 18 years? I needed a babysitter to pack up my coffee mug and the philodendron I'd kept alive longer than most of their careers. As I stood to leave, I caught Travis's eye. "You know," I said, keeping my tone conversational, "you might want to review all the contracts in your infrastructure folder, especially the ones dating back to the founding. You'd be surprised what details matter." He gave me the dismissive half-smile of someone who thought a 50-something operations manager couldn't possibly understand strategic importance. "We have people for that," he said. "Yes," I thought, gripping the brass key tighter. "You had people for that. You had me." 20 minutes later, I walked out of Brightstone Solutions carrying a cardboard box filled with personal items that somehow represented nearly 2 decades of my life. The security guard, Jim, whom I'd hired 3 years ago, looked apologetic as he walked beside me. "I'm sorry, Ms. Ward," he murmured, as we reached the parking lot. "Don't be, Jim," I replied, louder than necessary. "When one door closes, another opens. Sometimes you just need the right key." I placed the box in my car and drove away. the brass key heavy in my pocket. They wanted everything returned that belonged to the company. I'd complied perfectly. The lease agreement in my filing cabinet at home, the one that clearly stated Emily Ward as the sole lessee with full rights to the property, well, that had never belonged to the company at all. They thought they were eliminating redundancy. They had no idea they'd just eliminated their own foundation. The brass key in my pocket wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a time machine, taking me back to the winter of 2006 when Brightstone Solutions was nothing more than an ambitious idea and a rented closet masquerading as an office. I remember meeting the founder, Daniel Brightstone, at a networking event. He was brilliant, passionate, and completely clueless about anything that wasn't code. He'd developed a revolutionary inventory management system, but couldn't manage his own calendar, let alone a business. When he offered me a position as his operations person, he couldn't even articulate the actual job title. I saw potential not in the salary, which was laughable, but in the opportunity. Our first office was a disaster. Second floor of a building that should have been condemned, squeezed between a check-cashing place and a psychic who burned so much incense it seeped through the walls. The landlord, Mr. Petrov, was a 70-year-old Russian immigrant who trusted nobody and demanded everything in cash. But the rent was cheap, and we needed cheap. "I don't do business with companies," Petrov had declared when Daniel tried to sign the lease. "Companies disappear. People don't." Daniel had looked at me desperately. We'd already lost 2 potential spaces because of his credit history. Turns out genius programmers don't always pay their bills on time. Without hesitation, I'd stepped forward. "I'll sign it," I said. "Personal guarantee." It was supposed to be temporary. Once the company grew, we'd transfer everything to the corporate entity. Daniel promised we'd handle it next quarter for about 40 consecutive quarters. But while Daniel focused on the technology, I built everything else. I negotiated with vendors who didn't want to deal with a startup. I convinced our first major client to take a chance on us when we were still running servers out of Daniel's garage. I hired our first employees, teaching myself employment law from library books and free online resources. When we finally moved to our current building in 2009, a gleaming professional space that actually had working air conditioning, it was my relationship with Petrov that got us in the door. The building's management company had wanted extensive financial documentation, corporate bonds, guarantees that a 3-year-old startup couldn't provide, but Petrov had bought the building as an investment, and he remembered me. "Emily Ward," he'd said, pointing a gnarled finger at me. "She pays, every month, never late, never complaint. She signs, I lease." So once again, my name went on the lease. Daniel was already thinking about Series A funding and expansion into European markets. The lease was just paperwork to him, a detail that someone else would handle. And I handled it, like I handled everything else that wasn't sexy enough for the visionaries and innovators. I set up our infrastructure like I was building a house I'd live in forever. Every system, every process, every contract bore my fingerprints. When the company expanded from 4 to 40 employees, I was the one who figured out how to scale operations. When we landed the Morrison Industries contract that put us on the map, I was the one who spent 3 weeks living in their headquarters, ensuring our implementation was flawless. The lease renewal came up every 5 years like clockwork. 2014, 2019, each time. There was always something more important. First, it was the IPO preparation that never happened. Then it was the merger talks that fell through. "We'll transfer it to the company next time," became a running joke, except I was the only one who remembered it was supposed to be funny. Daniel left in 2020, cashing out his shares for enough money to buy a small island. He hugged me on his last day, told me I was the backbone of Brightstone, and promised to stay in touch. I got one email from him, sent from a beach in Thailand, asking if I could help him access an old file. That was it. The new leadership came in waves. First, the venture capitalists with their metrics and disruption, then the corporate types with their org charts and efficiency experts. Each wave promised transformation, but they all needed the same thing, someone who actually knew how things worked. I trained every executive assistant, explained our systems to every consultant, walked every new C-suite hire through the reality of our operations. They'd nod, take notes, and then present my explanations as their insights in board meetings I wasn't important enough to attend. The last lease renewal had been in 2019. I'd handled it myself, as always, signed my name on the dotted line while the latest CEO, Travis's predecessor, was busy announcing our bold new direction at a conference in San Francisco. The next renewal wouldn't be until 2024, except there was a clause I'd insisted on back in 2009 when I was signing personal guarantees for a company that might not exist in 6 months. A clause that Petrov's lawyer had added at my request. In the event of lease non-renewal by the specified date, all rights and privileges default to the named lessee. It was my insurance policy, though I'd never imagined I'd need to cash it in. After all, I was the backbone of Brightstone, indispensable, irreplaceable, redundant. 6 months before they showed me the door. I'd noticed something odd every January, like clockwork. I'd receive an email from building management about the upcoming lease renewal. It would arrive precisely on the 15th, marked urgent lease renewal documentation required. I'd handle it, file it, and move on. It was as routine as paying the electricity bill. But January 2024 came and went. No email. At first, I assumed it was an oversight. Everyone makes mistakes. I pulled up my calendar from the previous years. January 15th, January 15th, January 15th, going back over a decade. I checked my spam folder, thinking perhaps its new filtering system had caught it. Nothing. February arrived with its usual chaos of quarter-end preparations. Still no renewal notice. By March, a cold suspicion began forming in my stomach. I stayed late one evening, not unusual. I was always the last one out, and went through the filing cabinets in the administrative office, the ones nobody else ever touched because, well, that was Emily's domain. The lease agreement was exactly where I'd filed it 5 years ago. 23 pages of legal language, most of it standard boilerplate. But page 19, section 12.4, was circled in my own careful handwriting from 2009. Failure to provide written notice of renewal intention 90 days prior to lease termination date will result in forfeiture of renewal rights. All rights to the property will revert to the named lessee. The lease termination date was December 31st, 2024. 90 days prior would be October 2nd. It was now March 20th. I photocopied the entire document that night, taking the copy home and leaving the original exactly where it belonged. Then I did something I'd never done in 18 years. I stopped reminding anyone about anything that wasn't explicitly my problem. You see, Travis had implemented a new organizational structure when he arrived. Clear lanes of responsibility, he called it. No more overlap, no more confusion. Facilities management had been moved under the CFO, a sharp young man named Harrison who'd been brought in from a Fortune 500 company. Harrison had his own ideas about vendor management and had made it crystal clear that he didn't need input from legacy staff. "We're modernizing our approach," he'd announced in a meeting, looking directly at me. "No more handshake deals and personal relationships. Everything goes through proper channels." Proper channels? I'd almost laughed. April passed. May arrived with its spring cleaning energy, but no lease renewal appeared on anyone's radar. I watched Harrison's assistant, a recent MBA graduate named Jessica, frantically organizing his files, creating color-coded systems for everything. She was thorough. I'd give her that. But she was also 25 and had never dealt with a commercial lease in her life. In June, I overheard Harrison in the break room, bragging about the money he was saving by renegotiating all our vendor contracts. "Some of these arrangements were ancient," he said, pouring his third coffee of the day. "Nobody had looked at them in years. We were practically being robbed." Travis had nodded approvingly. "This is why we brought you in. Fresh eyes. Fresh eyes that couldn't see what was right in front of them." July was when they started the efficiency reviews, one by one. Long-term employees were called in to justify their positions. Sarah from accounting, who'd been there 12 years, was let go. "Redundant," they said. Tom from IT, 15 years of keeping our servers running, was replaced by an outsourced team in India. I knew my turn was coming. The writing wasn't just on the wall. It was in neon lights. August brought the first hints of fall and still no lease renewal. I did the math constantly, obsessively. October 2nd would come and go, and according to the contract, Brightstone Solutions would lose all rights to renewal. The lease would continue until December 31st under its current terms. But come January 1st, 2025, the only person with any legal right to the space would be the named lessee Emily Ward. September 15th, I opened my laptop to find a meeting invitation from HR for the following Tuesday. Quick sync, the subject line read. I stared at it for a long moment, then opened another browser tab and looked up the number for Petrov's management company. I didn't call, not yet, but I saved the number. That weekend, I went through every document I'd ever signed for Brightstone. The electricity account, in the company's name, thankfully. Water and sewage, also corporate. But the lease, the beautiful ironclad lease with its missed renewal deadline approaching like a freight train, that was all mine. September 28th. I cleaned out my desk drawer, leaving everything exactly as it appeared, but removing the few personal items I actually cared about. A photo from the company's 5th anniversary, when we still felt like a family. A coffee mug Daniel had given me that said, "World's most indispensable employee." His idea of a joke that had aged like milk. October 2nd came and went without a whisper from building management or Brightstone's leadership. The deadline passed as quietly as a ghost, and with it, any chance they had of keeping their office? They just didn't know it yet. The drive home from my termination felt like a victory lap disguised as a retreat. The moment my car cleared the parking garage, I pulled over and made the first call. Petrov Property Management, a crisp voice answered. This is Emily Ward. I'm the leaseholder for Suite 400 at the Brightstone building. I need to schedule an immediate lock change and discuss the termination of the current occupancy arrangement. There was a pause. Ms. Ward, our records show Brightstone Solutions as the tenant. Check your legal documents, I replied calmly. The lease is under my name personally. Has been since 2009, and as of October 2nd, Brightstone Solutions lost any claim to renewal rights. Another pause, longer this time. Please hold. 10 minutes later, I was speaking with Gregory Petrov, son of my original landlord who'd taken over the business. He remembered me. Ms. Ward, I see the situation. The 90-day notice period has indeed passed. You're well within your rights. How would you like to proceed? Complete lock change, effective immediately, new access control system, and I'll need you to send formal notice to Brightstone Solutions that they're trespassing on private property as of 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's aggressive timing. They terminated my employment today with immediate effect, I said. I'm simply returning the courtesy. By 3 p.m., I was meeting a locksmith at the building. Jim, the security guard, was on his break. I'd memorized the schedule years ago. The locksmith worked efficiently, replacing every lock on the suite's 4 entrances. The electronic access system was reprogrammed, rendering every employee keycard useless. At 4:30 p.m., I sent an email from my personal account to Travis, copying Harrison and the head of HR. Dear leadership team, per your request this morning, I have returned all property belonging to Brightstone Solutions. As you may have noticed, this does not include the office space at 400 Commerce Drive, as this lease has always been under my personal name. Due to your failure to properly renew the lease by the October 2nd deadline, Brightstone Solutions no longer has any legal right to the premises. Access has been restricted effective immediately. Your company's belongings will be available for supervised retrieval once proper arrangements are made through Petrov Property Management. Best regards, Emily Ward. My phone exploded within minutes. Travis called first, his voice cycling through confusion, anger, and barely controlled panic. Emily, what the hell is this? You can't just... Actually, I interrupted. And I have... Check with your legal team. This is extortion we'll sue you into. For what? Exercising my legal rights as a leaseholder, I suggest you read the contract your CFO failed to renew. Harrison called next, sputtering about corporate property and theft. Then Marcus from HR, trying to sound conciliatory while clearly reading from a legal script. I didn't answer any more calls after that. The text messages were even better. Jessica, Harrison's assistant, sent increasingly frantic messages about accessing files. Various employees wondering if this was some kind of drill. It panicking about servers that were now locked behind doors they couldn't open. At 6 p.m., I received a call from Petrov Management. Ms. Ward, There's a crowd of people outside Suite 400 demanding access. Some are quite agitated. Are they breaking anything? No, but they're making threats about calling the police. Let them, I said. I have the legal documentation. They don't. The police did come, around 7:30 p.m. 2 officers who looked deeply uninterested in corporate drama. I met them at the building with my lease agreement, the missed renewal documentation, and a written statement from Petrov management confirming my rights. So this is a civil matter, the older officer concluded after reviewing everything. You'll need to sort this out in court. Travis's face went from red to purple. Officer, our entire business is in there. Millions of dollars of equipment, critical data. Should have renewed your lease, the officer shrugged. Ma'am, you're within your rights to restrict access, but you can't hold their property hostage. Of course not, I agreed pleasantly. They can schedule retrieval through the property management company during business hours, with supervision, naturally. As the police left, Travis turned to me, his composure finally cracking completely. Emily, please, let's discuss this. What do you want? Money, your job back. I want you to understand something, I said, stepping closer. For 18 years, I held this company together, every system, every process, every crucial detail that you deemed redundant, that was me. You thought you were cutting fat. You were cutting your own foundation. We can work this out. Your lawyers can contact mine. You have 30 days to remove your property before I dispose of it. And Travis? I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected through 18 years of corporate meetings. Next time you eliminate someone's position, maybe check whose name is on the lease first. The next morning, photos started circulating on LinkedIn. Dozens of Brightstone Solutions employees standing outside their own office, locked out, carrying bankers' boxes of personal items they'd managed to retrieve from their cars. The caption on one post read, "When your company forgets who really holds the keys, #corporate karma." By noon, 3 different moving companies had called asking about the emergency relocation job for Brightstone Solutions. By evening, a startup working out of a WeWork space had inquired about subleasing that beautiful office that just became available. I sat in my living room, the brass key on the coffee table in front of me, and opened my laptop. 17 emails from recruiters who'd seen the news, 4 interview requests, one particularly interesting message from Daniel Brightstone himself, writing from Thailand. Holy shit, Emily, remind me never to cross you. P.S. Are you interested in consulting? But the best message was a text from Jim, the security guard. Ms. Ward, I just wanted you to know, Mr. Lane tried to climb through a window today. He got stuck. I have photos if you want them. I did want them. Very much. The dominoes started falling faster than I'd anticipated. Day 3. Post-lockout. The first crisis hit. The servers were still humming inside Suite 400 running critical client operations. But nobody could access them physically. The remote IT team in India could handle basic maintenance. But when the primary server crashed at 2:15 a.m., they needed someone on site. Harrison called me at 6 a.m., his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Emily, our clients are losing millions by the hour. You have to let our IT team in. Schedule it through Petrov management, I replied, sipping my morning coffee. Supervised access is available from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. It's Wednesday at 6 in the morning. We need access now. Should have thought about that before making me redundant. My availability is now limited to business hours. The Morrison Industries contract, the one I'd personally salvaged 5 years ago, was the first to jump ship. By noon, their legal team had invoked the emergency clause due to failure to maintain service standards. $20 million in annual revenue. Gone. But the real catastrophe was more mundane and infinitely more destructive. You see, I hadn't just managed the lease. I was the signature on virtually every operational contract that nobody else wanted to deal with. The water cooler service, the plant maintenance that kept the office from looking like a greenhouse gone wild, the cleaning crew who had the alarm codes, all of it filtered through me. The cleaning service was the first to refuse entry. No Emily, no clean. Maria, the crew supervisor, told Travis in broken English when he tried to meet them at a coffee shop. She'd been cleaning our offices for 8 years. and I was the only one who'd bothered to learn her last name. Then the coffee supplier cut them off. Turns out I'd personally guaranteed the account when Brightstone's credit was questionable in the early days. Without my signature on a new agreement, no more deliveries. "It's just coffee," Harrison said during an emergency meeting at a rented WeWork space. "We can survive without coffee." The junior developers nearly revolted. The HVAC maintenance company was next. The system in Suite 400 needed weekly filter changes, something to do with the server room's cooling requirements. Without access and without me to coordinate, the system started failing. The servers began overheating. By day 5, employees were deserting in droves. Not dramatically. This wasn't a movie. They just quietly updated their LinkedIn profiles and stopped showing up to the temporary workspace Travis had scrambled to arrange. Why stay with a company that couldn't even provide them with a desk? Sarah, who'd been let go 2 months earlier, called me laughing. 3 recruiters contacted me today, asking if I knew anyone from Brightstone looking for work. I gave them everyone's number except Travis's. The printer situation became its own special circle of hell. The high-end lease was under my name, another temporary arrangement from 2015. When the leasing company couldn't reach me for authorization, they marked the account as delinquent. They showed up at the WeWork space to repossess printers Brightstone didn't even have there. "How is everything under your name?" Jessica asked when she called, begging for help with the vendor chaos. "This makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense when you understand that for 18 years, I was the only constant in this company's leadership," I explained patiently. "Every time someone promised to fix it next quarter, I just handled it, and handling it meant using my credit, my reputation, my relationships." Day 7 brought my favorite crisis. The bank called about irregular activity on the corporate accounts. The CFO was supposed to be a signatory. But guess whose name was still primary on accounts opened in 2008? They'd frozen everything pending verification, which required appearing in person, at the branch inside Suite 400's building. Harrison actually cried during that call. I could hear it in his voice. The employees who'd been with Brightstone the longest started reaching out personally. Not for help. They knew that bridge was burned, but to share intelligence. Apparently, Travis had held an all-hands meeting where he'd promised everything would be resolved within 48 hours. That was 5 days ago. "He keeps saying you'll cave," Melissa from marketing told me over drinks. She'd already accepted a position elsewhere. "He thinks you're bluffing about disposing of the property." "What property?" I asked innocently. I returned everything that belonged to the company, as requested. The security company was my masterpiece. Jim had kept me informed about the chaos, but I knew his loyalty had limits. So when Safeguard Security called about their contract renewal, I pointed out that I was no longer authorized to sign for Brightstone Solutions. "But you're listed as our primary contact," they said. I was terminated on Tuesday. You'll need to establish a new contract with their current leadership. Brightstone's temporary office had no security. Within 2 days, 3 laptops walked out the door. Nobody could prove who took them. By day 10, the board called an emergency meeting. I knew because 3 board members reached out to me independently, trying to understand how one person's termination had triggered complete operational collapse. "We were told you were redundant," one said, genuine confusion in his voice. I replied. "If you define redundant as doing everything nobody else wanted to do for 18 years. The local business journal picked up the story. Local tech firm implodes after questionable termination decision. They didn't name me directly, but anyone in our industry knew. My phone rang constantly with job offers, consulting requests, and interview invitations. But the best call came from Petrov Management. "Ms. Ward, we've had an inquiry about the space. A startup is very interested in moving in January 1st. They're offering 20% above market rate." "How wonderful," I said. "Please tell them we're very interested in responsible tenants who value long-term relationships. Should we mention this to the current occupants' representatives?" "Oh, I wouldn't want to distress them during this difficult transition. Let's wait until they inquire." They hadn't inquired yet. Harrison was too busy trying to figure out why the company credit cards had all stopped working, and Travis was in full damage control mode with investors. The company valuation had dropped 40% in less than 2 weeks. Jim sent me another text that evening. Overheard Mr. Bain on a call. He said, and I quote, "How could one person have controlled everything? Guy still doesn't get it." No, he didn't. He'd looked at an org chart and seen redundancy. He'd never bothered to look at the foundation and see that sometimes one person isn't holding things back. They're holding everything up. The negotiation attempts started on day 12. First came Marcus from HR, calling at 7:30 a.m. with his most professional voice. "Emily, I hope we can discuss this situation like adults. The company is prepared to offer you a generous consulting contract." "I'm listening," I said, though I wasn't really. 6 months, full benefits, double your previous salary. All you need to do is sign the lease back to the company and help us transition the vendor relationships. Triple the salary, 2 years guaranteed, and a written apology from Travis published in the company newsletter. The line went quiet. "Emily, be reasonable." "I am being reasonable. You deemed me redundant. Now you want to hire me back at double the rate. Seems like I was pretty valuable after all." He hung up. Next came the lawyers, a formal letter from Whitman and Associates. Lots of intimidating letterhead and legal jargon that essentially boiled down to, "Please give us our office back or we'll sue." My response, drafted by my own attorney, was beautiful in its simplicity. "My client is exercising her legal rights as leaseholder. Your client's failure to maintain proper documentation is not my client's responsibility." The third attempt was more creative. Harrison showed up at my house on a Saturday afternoon, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled. "Emily, please, can we just talk person to person?" I let him stand on my doorstep. "We're talking. The company is hemorrhaging money. We've lost